now. We are live. My name is Dr. Tova Goldfine. We are live today, Monday, April 17th. It's now 2 o'clock Israel time. It's 9 p.m. in Australia, in Melbourne. And Devorah is here with me in Israel, but we are global. This is TMS Roundtable Global. And I'm always very happy to be here with Rose Hoy, my professional partner and co-host for 3 years. I think the show, Devorah, is 156 broadcasts. So
Wow.
Welcome. Rose, can you introduce our guest today?
I sure can. Now, Devorah Kur
Yes.
has written a book. It's called Man's Search for Healing. Remember the word healing. Now, she has learnt logotherapy under Viktor Frankl's Institute. Now, if you remember, Viktor Frankl was imprisoned by the Nazis and he survived the concentration camp. He survived that by being present in every moment. And he observed that everyone who anticipated getting out or escaping or getting help often died, whereas those that could stay calm survived. A beautiful, wonderful story. And if you haven't read that book, Man's Search for Meaning is a very, very important book for every human being. Now, what Devorah has done is she has a whole range of clinical skills, and one of them is logotherapy, which has been inspired by Viktor Frankl. So she also has a journey, and she also has an injury, and hopefully she'll tell us a little bit about that. But Devorah, first of all, show us your book, please.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you to Rose and Tova. It's so wonderful to
I
be
want to
here.
say something very interesting. Tomorrow is Yom HaShoah, which is the day
Absolutely.
of remembrance. How appropriate to have Devorah
It
on
is,
the
isn't
show.
it? Yeah, absolutely.
To show us your
Yeah.
wonderful book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Book.
It is.
Thank you. Good. Now you see, Man's Search for Healing. Important to see that because it's of the same ilk or the same theme as Man's Search for Meaning. Sorry. So Man's Search for Healing is about meaning, and it's about values, and it's about how you live your life. And Devorah, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Tell us about your life and your story and how you got to be in this place and your amazing story of recovery. Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So it really started around 27 years ago. 27. My father was diagnosed with colon cancer. And at the time, I was an interior designer. That was my life. And I was very creative, and that was my life. But I became almost obsessed with reading what is the role of the patient? What can the patient do to help himself? Or is everything just up to doctors? And I read many, many books, including the books by Dr. Bernie Siegel, who I'm sure you have discussed on this round table here before. And he speaks a lot about being an active participant in your healing journey. That yes, we see doctors, but we actually have to empower the patient to be in the driver's seat, to actually, what are his dreams, what are his fears, what are his strengths, and to bring all that to the healing. It can't just be the medications one takes or the surgeries. And I absolutely love that. And eventually I was pulled into this calling of moving into a healing role. I wanted to help people be well. And after my father died, I was also trying to heal from my own grief and my own wounds around that. But I then studied to become a reflexologist. And I found this to be a wonderful way to help people on a body level. So they would come to me, let's say infertility clients, and they would say, why can't I have a baby? And I was like, I don't know, but I can get the hormones right, and we can work the body, and we can do all of that. Or the cancer patients would say, I'm too young to be sick. Why do I have to be sick? I'm like, I don't know, but let's work your immune system and let's get everything working correctly. So I felt there was something missing for me, because when all these why questions, I couldn't help on the existential crisis for these people. And that's when logotherapy entered my life. I had actually gone on a trip to Poland, and I found it very, very inspiring with all these tragic stories I'd heard about survival and terrible decisions that had to be made. And I just felt the power of the human spirit. And I wanted to learn more about that. And then Dr. Frankel's book, which I had read years before but never thought of studying, then I thought, this is what I need to do to help my clients. So I went to study logotherapy. And logotherapy is really a journey of understanding how we think about finding hope in a situation and about changing the way we see the situation, not from being a victim, this has happened to me, why is this happening to me, but what can I do in response to it? And we all have that ability. And I heard all these stories, and for years I've been studying logotherapy and more and more and more. And just to see the resilience of Dr. Frankel and many, many other humans, human beings that I've worked with, both clients and patients who I have worked with, to see that when we can find the what now, this is in my life right now. There is nothing I can do to change it. Say COVID or whatever the injury or the ailment or the autoimmune disease or the disease, whatever it is that is in my life right now, I cannot change that right now. But what I can do is I can show up to it and bring everything that I have within me to help overcome this. And something that I'm very passionate about, and it is a chapter in my book, is the difference between being healed and being cured.
Wow.
So
Excellent.
this for me is something massive, because at the end of the day, we are all going to die at some point. We don't know when it is, but it is 100% guaranteed. This is going to happen. So I think from a logotherapy perspective, how it looks at that is that when there is illness or there is something which makes life more, imminent and, precious, when there is an illness or a disease or something that we are struggling with, that is where logotherapy comes into, say, not the fear of death, but the need to live, right? And not everyone can get cured. Many people die. As we know, the greatest of human beings have died. Moses, Mother Teresa, Mandela, the greatest of human beings meet their end. And that's not what we're trying to avoid. What we are trying to do actually is to live a meaningful life, not just to live, but we are trying to live a meaningful life despite what we have. So even if we don't,
Yes, authentically.
authentic and meaningful, even if we don't get cured, we can still be healed. And this is where I feel we all have choices. We might not be able to change the verdict of what we have, but that doesn't mean we can't find healing within that. These few doors might be closed for me right now, but there are many other ones that are still open. And I think this is something we learned from Viktor Frankl. He would speak about how, all day long he would work in the camps on these menial jobs, working on the railway tracks, and really he used to use his hands for healing, and now he's using them for bringing
Manual labor
into the camps. And it really went against, his beliefs and what he wanted to be doing. And he said, no matter what they did, no matter how starving we were, no matter how freezing we were, he knew that every day a sunset was coming, which would signal the end of the workday, and he knew there would be some beauty in the day. So even when there was no beauty, he still found a way of how to bring it in. And I love this approach because I think sometimes, we tend to focus on everything we can't do right now because of this in my life. But actually, we need to also be looking at, well, what can I do? Sometimes, I've been privileged to work with many cancer patients, and sometimes there is a healing and a curing, but sometimes there isn't a curing, but they can still come to the end of their lives healed. And for me, that is a real privilege. And I think all of us, well, for me specifically, I can only talk for myself. I want to come to the end of my life, whenever that will be. And we see in the world every day tragedies and terrorism, and none of us know when the end of our lives is going to be. which really lights up and the urgency of, if it's today, then I want today to be lived well. That every day we shouldn't just wake up to a disease and think, oh, my clock is ticking, but we should every day feel that there's an urgency to live life to the fullest, despite what's going on.
Can you tell me
Mhm.
how you deal with fear?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, because I've got a huge background in palliative care.
Okay.
And some people die peacefully and beautifully. And, many children that I've looked after have reassured their parents.
Yes. And
And
Elizabeth
they've had
right.
visions and things as
Yes.
they've been dying, and they've reassured their parents. And then there's another group of people that are so distressed.
Yes.
It's terrible.
Yes.
So can you just talk about that transition from
Yes.
acceptance, maybe denial, to acceptance?
Yes.
Because the same thing goes with chronic pain. You can
Absolutely.
deny your chronic pain, or you can accept it, and you can accept what's going on in your life. As you say, with Viktor
Live
Frankl,
despite.
the end of the working day will bring a couple of hours of space.
Yes.
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 And the same thing will happen with chronic
Yes.
pain patients.
Yes.
They'll get some sleep. They may find it difficult to sleep, but they'll get a certain amount.
Yes.
So what you've just been saying is so pertinent to
Yes.
our audience. So
Right.
can you talk about that transition
Yes.
from
I'll tell
denial to acceptance?
many years in my life, I lived with the attitude of just put a smile on my face and everything will be okay. And that works to a point. But since I have studied somatic experiencing, which is trauma therapy, it shows that it doesn't work, because what happens when we just put the smile on our face is we push the pain further down.
Repression. Yeah.
We repress it. We exile it, right? That's not okay to
Nice
be.
way of putting it, actually. It's
Yes,
exiled
we
into the
exile.
gut. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I've also studied internal family systems, which speaks about the exiles. All of these feelings which are not okay: rejection, loneliness, abandonment. And before, I used to be like, just put a smile on my face and let's just push those things away. But it doesn't work, because an onion left in a dark cupboard continues to grow, right? So what we push away just grows, and it wants our attention.
And a
So,
potato, the same thing with potatoes, isn't it?
and potatoes, absolutely,
Yeah.
in the dark. And we don't actually want things growing that we haven't addressed. So there's a huge thing here about unfinished business. For me, none of us live in Disneyland or Mauritius, or, they have lived lives where just every day everything is perfect. No one on the planet, even the Queen of England, had her fair share of family problems, right? So it doesn't matter what's our race, what's our religion, what's our gender, what's our age, what's our financial status. Everyone has struggle and difficulty, right? And if we can meet these things by not pushing away that which isn't pleasant, but rather embracing it in a loving way, then that helps healing. Remember, I spoke of the difference between healing and curing, is when we have unfinished business. Those are the things like the onion. We push away. I can't go there. Don't ask me about that. Never mention that person's name in front of me. That's called unfinished business. And when we push those things away, the body fights back and the body talks. Or someone said to me yesterday, my body's not talking back. My body's screaming, right? One of my clients said that to me yesterday. Her body wasn't talking, but screaming. So for me, when I work with people, it is about addressing the unfinished business in life. Some people can say, "Whoa!" You say, "How are you around that? That family fallout?" You say, "It was very challenging. It was very hard, but we've all come to a place of peace around it." That's finished business. But if you are saying, "Don't mention that person's name to me, or do not even bring that up. We don't speak about that in this house." That says there's unfinished business. And unfinished business is not finished. It's still here, came into our lives for a reason. We don't always know what the reason is, but we do know if something is happening to us, there's an opportunity. For me, I always like to look at it and help my clients to look at it as there's an invitation here, an invitation of how you're going to show up now. And a lot of the time we say, why me? Why do I have to go through this? But if we could rather respond, what now? Right? One woman came to me and she said to me, all of these ideas are so lovely that you're saying, but I have an autoimmune disease and I can't just get rid of it. It's going to be with me forever. So there's no gifts for me here. So I said, if you have this and it's going to be around forever, then I'm sure you have a lot of wisdom around it. And perhaps you can be helping others overcome it. You could be starting support groups. There's a way that you can use what you've got and what you've learned to help others. There's so many avenues and doors that can open to where you can find meaning, even within what you have, right? And I think that's what we need to start turning around. So when you ask about fear, I think we need to look at fear as if and any kind of something that comes up, rejection, abandonment, loneliness, anything that unworthiness, anything that comes up, we look at these things as if they are a small child, right? And if a small child came and said to me, I'm so scared, I'm scared they're not going to pick me for the team, I wouldn't say, like, just put that nonsense aside, just get on with it, pull yourself together. I would say, oh, that sounds challenging for you. Tell me about it. Let me hear what you're scared about. And that's when healing comes. But what we do is we say to ourselves, no, fear's not good. I can't go there. Or this is too much for me. But the way to approach fear is to actually embrace it and say, even like, Thich Nhat Hanh, he was a Buddhist monk psychologist who would speak about when these things arise, you say, oh, there you are, my dear. And you pat yourself on the shoulder.
Fear, come. Let's have tea together, fear. Because
Yeah.
fear's a thought and energy, and most of the time not a real threat.
Yeah. False evidence appearing real. That's what fear stands for.
True. Very true.
False evidence appearing real.
We don't want to push it away and say, oh, please, nonsense. We want to actually say, wow, I'm really scared right now. And be with that place. So
Devorah,
yes.
Yeah. Look, you've just inspired me. Could you mention the chapters in your book?
Yes, certainly.
Please?
Okay, so firstly, I introduce what logotherapy is all about, the principles about it, and I speak about finding meaning, what meaning is, okay?
Yes.
And then I speak about the mind-body connection, because for me, I'm absolutely passionate about that. You cannot separate mind and body. Like, say, for instance, fear. Here's something here, but it actually plays out in the body, right? If I'm waiting for the doctor to call me with results, right? I feel it as a physical sensation. We can't separate mind and body, and that's, I think, something very important. There was a time when doctors said if your arm is broken, you go to the doctor, and if your heart is broken, you go to the psychologist, and they don't come together, but they do. We actually can't separate it. If I've hurt someone's feelings and now I need to apologize to them, I feel that as, trembling inside, a knot in my stomach. There's a physical sensation that goes with these things. So I explore in one of the chapters the mind-body connection.
Lovely.
And then I speak about illness and what illness is and our options as becoming an active participant in our healing journey.
Okay.
And overcoming the unfinished business. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. So now in that chapter, talk a little bit about the dis-ease.
Right.
And how the dis-ease needs to be recognized, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And then the overcoming of it is
Yes.
manageable, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
I also like to say to my clients that, I'm not a dog lover, but when a dog brings you a bone or a ball and it puts it at your foot and it wants you to throw it, if you just like, get out of here, it's going to nag you until you eventually throw that ball, right? And this is exactly what happens with these feelings like dis-ease and fear and any of the other feelings that might come up. The more we ignore it, the louder it's going to speak to us.
That's
if
right.
we could show up for it as if there you are, my dear. Wow, you're really petrified. You're scared. Come and tell me about it. You're not alone. It's reasonable for you to be scared right now. You've just heard the worst thing possible. Let's
Yeah.
be with it. Let's cry about that. Let's look at what the fears are. When we can, and it's great if we could show up for ourselves in that way, but if we can't, to go to someone who can help us on that journey, because we don't need to push these things away. And if we can address them, there can be more healing, more and more
Exactly.
healing along the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
I'll
that
do.
acceptance
Yes.
now, can we link that? Because that's that recognition of the disease, and then the fact that the acceptance
Yes.
drops the need to focus on the disease, doesn't it?
Well, I think there's a process. There's a
Yeah.
process. First, like, oh, this can't be happening. There could be denial. They've made a mistake. This can't be my life. Then there needs to go through that anger. Oftentimes I deal with people that they have tremendous anger towards themselves, that they've brought on this in their life because of a certain lifestyle or whatever, habits of smoking or whatever could have been. There's anger towards God. How's this been brought on? I'm being punished. So we need to give space for that. You can't just come to acceptance. Like, acceptance is not the first week's chapter. There's first, let's deal with everything this has brought up for you now. This is horrible. The carpet has just been pulled out.
Would you call it taking responsibility for what happened? Because even though, I mean, like when you said you read about healing, one of my first books 30 something years ago was Anatomy of an Illness by Norman Cousins.
Yes.
He had to look at how he got an arthritic disease, and he understood it came from out here. So even if something comes from out here, it's in our body. And I know how Bernie Siegel feels about taking responsibility, not blame.
Not blame. Blame doesn't work. Blame doesn't work.
Continue. Yes, continue.
It doesn't help to blame, but to come to the place of saying, yes, this is in my life. What am I going to do about it? The what now? Not the why me, or why did I bring this upon myself, or why did it's this family that I was in, or that whoever else. Blame doesn't work in these situations. But the acceptance, coming to acceptance, is really saying, wow, this is in my life right now. It stinks, and it's really horrible, and it's hard, and there's tears, and there's pain. And what can I do now that it is here? Where are my choices still? Because it feels like this great door has been shut, or this big boulder has been landed on top of me. But what are my choices? Even if that has happened, what can I still do? And that is taking responsibility, which really is our ability to respond. That's what responsibility is. How do we respond in those situations? And I always say to people, it's not about self-bereavement, and we're not here to beat ourselves up.
Criticize or judge.
Yeah, that doesn't help at all, right? Or anyone else. What does help is a loving approach to then, oh, there's fear. Oh,
to the suffering. A loving approach to the suffering.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's that beautiful line, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. We're all going to go through pain, emotional, spiritual.
It's hard for many people to hear suffering is a choice. This is hard. And I only say, like, it's hard because suffering, like, how do you explain that, Devorah and Rose? Suffering is a choice. How do you explain that to somebody who's suffering?
Can I?
Yes,
yeah.
please.
I think that the suffering is that sense of, I can't get out of it. I'm stuck. That's the sense of the suffering. Whereas the pain is a pain that you can actually deal with when you get out of the hole, so to speak. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, that's a small way of putting it. How would you put it, Devorah?
I'm just thinking about this show on Oprah I watched once about this beautiful young woman who had this terrible car accident. A drunk driver went into her, and her car blew up in flames, and she basically lost all the skin on her body. She lost her ears, she lost her nose, she lost her fingers and toes, and absolutely everything. And she had no face. And she came on Oprah with this big hat, you couldn't see much. And she said, my life has changed. My life has been ruined in the way it was going. And she was a beautiful young woman. And she said, every day I allow myself 10 minutes to cry for everything I've lost.
How
And then I
beautiful.
get on with my day. And I thought that is so honoring to the pain that she has felt. But she chooses not to suffer from it. For whatever
Exactly.
reason, this has happened in her life, and she is choosing a new way to live with this very big difficulty. And I'm not saying this is easy. We need support. We need love. We need people around us who can nurture us and be on our team, of encouraging us to come to this place, because it is very, very hard when we are suffering from something, and it's very, very challenging. It's very hard to pull ourselves up naturally. And actually, you asked if I'd speak about my injury, and when I had this terrible accident in December 2021, I fell on my head and I broke my neck. And there was a lot of suffering. There was pain, there was suffering, there was fear. What's going to be? When the doctor walked in to give me my diagnosis, she was very cold, and she just looked at me and she said, "You're lucky you didn't die. You're lucky you're not paralyzed. Your neck is broken, and don't move." That's all she said. And I remember the first thought that I had to myself the first thing was, who breaks their neck? That was my first response. And the second thought that I thought was, I'm going to be okay, whatever okay is, and I'm going to teach people how I overcame this. That was what I dug in. And I think that's because I have tools, right? I've studied trauma therapy, I've studied logotherapy, and I had a lot of things I could draw on and grab to help me overcome. And I didn't know I didn't know that I would heal. I didn't know what it would be like, but I knew I would bring the best of me to show up to that. And thank God, you see me now. Everything has healed and returned to normal, and that wasn't a guarantee, and I didn't know that. And also, Viktor Frankl speaks about it. He was in the camps. He didn't know when he was getting out. He was there for years.
Or if he was getting out, even.
He didn't know, or if.
If.
And that is often what we are facing. What people, my clients, are facing is,
like, I don't know tomorrow, and how do I be in the moment, which is the hardest thing for the brain to be in the moment.
When we don't know.
One of the things the patients say is, why did this happen to me?
Yeah.
Why am I being punished? What has God done to me?
Yes.
And I'm bringing that in with Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
And the fact is that we're under God's umbrella. He's not going to zap us out, but we're always under his umbrella. Whatever goes wrong, he's always with us. It's not.
If that is what someone believes, if they have that relationship and connection with God, I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, but many people blame their circumstance on, why weren't my prayers answered? But their prayers were answered if they notice that they're just under his umbrella or her umbrella, however you want to put it.
There's another chapter in my book that I write on forgiveness, because I feel a lot of unfinished business that we carry around is resentments and of the past. And so I in depth studied forgiveness, and there's a lot of myths around forgiveness where people get stuck. And one of the places of forgiveness is actually towards God. It's towards the self, it could be towards other people, and it could be towards God as well. So I look and I really go into depth around what forgiveness is, around the myths. People say, I can't forgive that person who did this in my life, brought me all this suffering. Well, you're not going to forgive that person for what they did. You're going to forgive to let them out of your body finally, because they have been sitting in here and and occupying space in you for all of these years, even if it happened 20, 30 years ago. And they have moved on happily enough. They've managed to move on, but you're the one who's suffering. So a big thing around forgiveness that I really try and change the perception for people is it has nothing to do with the perpetrator. Forgiveness is a great gift that we give to ourselves when we set ourselves free from the pain of the past, the shackles that have held us down in suffering. So I really recommend anyone who is struggling with unfinished business and pain and hurts from the past. And I'm not saying these things are not real. They are there, and the hurts and pains are terrible and tremendous and very deeply, deeply felt as wounds. What I am saying is that healing, which is what we are all looking for in our lives, can come when we can just release that person out of our body. They did the most terrible thing, but we are the one who every day is focusing on it. And that's not good for our immune system. So it's important for us to be able to work on that process of, some people don't like the word forgiveness, and I even speak about that. I address that. What do you mean forgive? I cannot forgive what this person did. That is not forgivable. And there are some things that are not forgivable. And even Viktor Frankl says that the way to show up and respond to these things is we have to live a life of what ought not to be in the world. This was done to me, and my response will not be to become a victim.
Right. They're doing to themselves what the person did to them.
Yeah. And that's very hard for people to hear. But to take the stand and say, this ought not to be in the world, this should never have happened to me, and I will make sure the way I conduct my life here onwards will be the opposite. I will do the correct version of what should be. Okay. And so I feel that's an important chapter too.
Devorah, just for our audience, that isn't really forgiveness, is it? That's more like standing up for your justice, something like that. Yeah. So you don't actually have to forgive the perpetrator as such, but you have to stand up for your own sense of justice. Because often people get entangled with this forgiveness idea. How can I ever forgive my mother for beating me? Yeah. Okay. But she beat me, but I'm a person separate to her, and I can actually live my life now, although I was beaten. Yes?
Yes, we can find a way, but what we want to do
a bit more out a bit more.
Yes. So I think I'll just give an example. There's a woman who I interviewed in my book. Her name's Panyata, and she lives in South Africa. And she insisted on having her name mentioned in full. She said because as a little girl she had no voice, and now she wants her voice heard by her name. And she was sexually abused by her stepfather for many years, over and over and over again, her and her sister. And she says, when I spoke to her about forgiveness, she says to me, there is no forgiveness for this man because what he did is unforgivable. But I am not his God. One day he will meet his maker. But I choose to live my life without his hatred and abuse in my body. And for that reason, I release him. Do you see the difference? I learned this from him.
Okay, that's what I wanted to say. It's the release.
Release. We don't want to hold on to it, because what it is, if anyone who's listening who ever knew the late Rabbi Bella, he says that when you walk around with resentments and grudges from the past, he says what it is each day you wake up as if you are attaching to your ankle a ball and chain and, dragging that with you through the day. So 30% of your energy is focused on the past, and you only show up to your present with 70% of who you are. And we don't want that. If we're trying to recover from something, we want to bring all of who we are. So I love the way this woman, Pan, she said, he will one day have to be accountable for what he's done. I am not his God. I release him. He cannot, I need to have a loving internal space for my inner child. And that's what I will do. I will show up for my inner child in the way that she needs now, a loving parent. I cannot carry on with this perpetration and let that go. but it takes a
Deborah,
lot of
thank you. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Because, you know, we get this story, we need to forgive to move on but it's not so much forgiving. It's because some of those things are unforgivable, but we can actually find our own space.
Yes. And
Yeah.
actually, logotherapy really says like this. There are things which are unforgivable, but there is also responsibility of the person who has had these unforgivable things done to them to be in the world in the way that is right action, right? If wrong things were done to you, you correct it by right action. And that is the way to show up to these things.
Yeah.
And so I use different terms in that chapter. I use forgiveness, I use releasing the struggle, and I use letting go, right? Because they are different for different people. You know, the word forgiveness is triggering, but it has nothing to do with the perpetrator. Nothing.
That's
It
right.
really has
Nothing.
nothing.
Zilch.
Zilch. It's not about them. They've actually moved on. They have happy lives. They've moved on and they've forgotten about you. But you are the one who is still holding this toxic
Suffering.
poison, suffering.
Yeah.
And all of us deserve to nurture the pain and the hurts within us and to help those to heal. And we can only do that if we are prepared to, distance ourselves from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that we can come to a place, as this woman Pan has done, she can freely and easily speak about this terrible abuse that happened to her, unforgivable, terrible abuse. She can speak because it's finished. It's not unfinished business. Like she doesn't say, don't ask me about him. She can speak about it. And that's called finished business. It's the unfinished business that causes us pain, right? Even people use these words. This eats away at me. It's eating me up inside.
That's right.
We don't want things eating us up inside, okay? Because when cells start and convert to eating up healthy cells, that doesn't look good. We don't want to invite that kind of energy into our bodies. So we owe it to ourselves to come to a place of healing, to help ourselves close the book on that. Still not a nice book, and that's where trauma therapy comes in as well. There's a beautiful, beautiful idea in trauma therapy called the corrective experience. So let's say someone went through something horrible, something traumatic, right? I'll just give my neck for an example, right?
It's a very good example.
Yeah, it's a good example. So I fell on my head. I was locked in a room because the door was bolted locked. It was a security room, so it wasn't something that could be kicked open. The fire department came and my neighbor with a crowbar. It was all quite intense. And when they came in, the paramedics put me on, they firstly wanted me to sit up in a chair. And, my knowledge from reflexology and Grey's Anatomy said, I'm not sitting anywhere. I said, get me a board and secure my neck. I said, there's something wrong with my head. I thought it was my head. I didn't know it was my neck. So they eventually brought this board and they secured me to the board, but it was a thin plank. And I felt petrified on this plank that I was on. Petrified. And then they had to take me down a big flight of stairs which had 3 turns, right? And I was at a 45-degree angle. I was totally traumatized from that as well. Afterwards, when I did a trauma therapy session with one of my colleagues, she came to this point, and it was very hard for me. Every time I would think back to that plank, I would get tearful, I would get upset. And she said to me, what would have been better for you? What could that plank have been instead? I said it could have been wider and it could have been a big marshmallow. So she said, okay, so why don't you just imagine that? Go back to the scene and think of they put you on this big marshmallow. It was comfortable, it was protective, it was soft, and they carried you now carefully down the stairs. Okay? And she said to me, I know it didn't happen this way, but just imagine what difference it would have made had it happened this way.
Yeah.
Now, every time I go going back to that, I see marshmallow. It got now into my brain.
Also brought safety. You were able to bring safety to a part of you that felt so threatened.
Absolutely.
Language.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we can actually go back and give the part of us, because this is where trauma comes in. When there is fear and helplessness coupled together, that's when we get trauma, PTSD. So what we want to do is go back and fix up that, help the body discharge, firstly, the fear, and then to offer a correctional experience to help the nervous system repair and come back to normal.
To calm the nervous system.
To balance.
Regulate, that's the word I'm looking for. We're
Yes,
looking for regulation. And when we can discharge the trauma and the fear, that's why it's not good to just say, I'll just put a smile on your face and everything's okay, because everything's actually not okay. But if we can say, well, I'm so scared, I'm so petrified, right? Then we can say, okay, what would help me? What would have been good? Okay, if my husband had been sitting next to me, that would have also been good, because he was up north on a wine tasting vacation with some buddies,
Oh, no.
3 hours away, and then when I could lie there on the floor, I was all by myself, and I was lucky enough to have been trained as a somatic experiencing therapist, and I could say when my body was shaking, because my body was like shaking, I could say, this is exactly what's meant to happen. Your body's so wise. This is good. And then I could look around the room and I could say, oh, look at my beautiful plant and my candles and my photographs of my family. And I could, plug into resources which could help me. This also helped to settle my nervous system. So if we can't do this at the time, if we don't have the skills, afterwards we can go and have a session with somatic experiencing to help release and discharge the trauma to bring the body back to regulation. That's what we want.
Exactly. Yeah. So now we've got into forgiveness. What's the next chapter?
I speak about attitude and gratitude.
Good. Yeah.
That's
Well, we've
very
just talked
big,
about that, really,
because
haven't
that
we?
also empowers us. I may not be able to, have a sunny day outside because it's pouring, but that doesn't mean I have to stay indoors. I can put on a raincoat and rain boots and, do what needs to be done. So we always have choices. And they might not be the ones we want. And there's actually that beautiful also idea from Sheryl Sandberg. When option A is not available, we go to option B. But
Could
sometimes
we just talk about relationships now in that regard?
yes,
Trauma?
yes. So support system is very, very important. Sometimes also when I was recovering from my neck, there was one person who straight away said to me right in the beginning, aren't you curious why this happened to you? And I'm like, and the truth of the matter is we're not going to find reasons. Maybe one day at the end of our life, we'll get the answers. But right now, there are no reasons why this happened. We can try and make meaning of why it happened. And I encourage people to do that, but we're never going to find the why, which means that's where the invitation comes to the what now. This has happened. Now what? That's where I was able to come into. So people who were going to that, are you a victim? Like, I'm not in that realm. I also wasn't in the realm of poor you. People spoke to me, oh, you poor thing. I'm like, don't talk to me like that. I need healing energy around me.
Did you lose some friends during that time? It's hard to be around a person who's healing. This is also for the family and the environment, the relationship of the people that it's uncomfortable.
The relationship is very important with the people who can nurture us while we need nurturing. And often when I speak with the cancer patients that I work with about their support system, because if your support system is feeding your fears, that's not good. How are you after the chemotherapy? Like when you come with pity, that doesn't help. So unless you need to feel that, then that's fine. But if like, don't speak to me in that way. Speak to me, bring me encouragement. Tell me stories of people who who overcame this. Don't give me statistics of who didn't. So we want to help ourselves. Yeah.
Could we just now move into a little bit of anger?
Yeah.
And the guilt about the anger.
Right. So
you've got someone you're on your deathbed
Mhm.
and someone comes and says, "Oh, you poor thing, I don't know how you're doing it," or whatever. What do you what would you say to our audience about what that person who's having this sort of, how would you put it, like, way of being spoken to?
Right. So I think we there's a way also of speaking. We don't want to speak in IFS, internal family systems. They say we don't want to speak from our part. We want to speak for our part. We don't want to become anger, but we want to speak about the anger from the place. This is how it makes me feel. I would rather be spoken to in this way. But
Yes,
anger is an emotion that needs expression.
acknowledgement, doesn't it? Yes.
Absolutely. I read, I don't know if it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book. After my father died, I was very angry. I was very angry. This huge man in my life was taken. He was huge. He was everything, my biggest cheerleader, everything to me. And he died way too young. And I was really angry. And I don't know, it might have been in her book that I read. She said, go to the hardware store and buy yourself 30 centimeters of hose pipe, which I didn't. Come back, close the bedroom door, and hit the bed until you get it out. Like, you have to give an expression to the anger, because stuffing it down does not work. And then it comes out at the people you love in other ways. So giving an expression to the anger is very important. And in somatic experiencing, we actually have a way of thinking of the anger. So once I worked with a client who had a terrible car accident. It was her husband was driving the car and he was negligent, and she had a lot of, she was in the car with him, and she had a lot of anger because she got injured. She had a lot of anger towards him. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And she couldn't bring it up because she didn't want to lose her marriage. Right? And in our session, we found the anger where it lived in her body, and we brought it to her jaw, we brought it to her eyebrows, and she pushed on a surface and allowed that anger to come out and dissipate it, right? Because it sits in our body as a sensation, and that's not good. So when we can work with anger, anger is neither positive nor negative. It's good. There are times when we need to be angry, right?
Yeah.
But there are times when it's not good for us. But pushing that down is not good. So getting help, also like speaking about the anger, using
Acknowledging it.
props
Yeah.
or whatever to help release and discharge it is very beneficial and therapeutic. Yeah.
Wow.
Thanks, Devorah. That's lovely the way you've put that together.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next chapter.
Yeah. So right through all the chapters, what I have done as well, because I really believe that people learn from stories. So I tell stories about myself, my own healing journey, places where I've struggled in my life and what helped. And as well, I bring case studies of clients that I've worked with, because I feel people can identify with other people's pain, and that helps them with their own. So there are, throughout every chapter, there are stories and case studies of people who overcame, people who used humor, people who could take responsibility, what that responsibility was, how they could understand what their body part was, how it was speaking to them, giving that body part an opportunity to voice its its grievance or its pain. And so the whole book is filled with stories, because I feel people might not remember your concepts, but they will remember the stories. So I bring many stories to help
Lovely.
people. So I also speak about illness, and I have then a chapter on post-traumatic growth, which is the ability also. It's a what now, because many times, once I was actually giving a talk, and a woman stood up at the end and she said, Devorah, very nice, all these concepts that you're speaking about, but I don't understand how you can say, someone can say getting cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. That seems a little bit far-fetched. So someone raised her hand in the audience and she said, I'll answer that question. She was an old lady and she said, 40 years ago, I got breast cancer and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. My life was going in this direction, she said, and all of a sudden it was going in this direction. And I had two choices, which I did. I mourned the choice of that road, and that door and that path was closed for me. But I embraced this new one and where it took me. And actually it brought healing. And time again, I have heard this from people. One woman came to me and she said her husband, who had been a high-powered businessman, married to his work, and he was CEO of his company and just provided money for his family, but no connection, no relationships with his children. He got one day this diagnosis, and he was estranged from his children. He got this diagnosis, which was 3 months to live. And on that day, he left his job, he left his work, and he started building relationships with his children. He started repairing. I always say to my clients, if you woke up today breathing, you can repair anything. Okay?
Absolutely.
And she said, 14 years later, he died from the original diagnosis with all his children standing around the bed and a loving relationship with all of them and her, his wife. And she said, this is, what was the best thing that ever happened to him was that diagnosis. Because had he, continued the life he was living, she said his children might not even have been at his funeral. But
That's
what
right.
happened with the illness is that, and sometimes, and I'm not saying this is easy, this is hard work. When we are faced by our demons, we are faced by our greatest fears. But that is what life is about. Life on the heart machine doesn't look so good when it looks like that. But life has ups and downs. That's a healthy life, and that's what we want. So not to shy away from the difficulties and the challenges, but actually to show up to them. Because my daughter has this thing on her wall which says, I never knew how strong I was until being strong was my only option. Right? On a beautiful day like today, when the sun is shining, we don't generally wake up and think, how can I be great today? But when your neck is broken or you wake up to a new diagnosis, you can think to yourself, what can I do to overcome this? And you have resources. Or what have I done in the past to overcome difficult things?
Or you can accept, if you wake up and you say, I need to go to bed, I'm depressed, you can accept that reality with a loving, compassionate way, because it's not the typical person. It's the person, 1,000 of our thoughts are repetitive and 999 are negative. So we have to deal with the reality of our fight and flight system and our primal nature, right, Rose? That we tend to look at the glass half empty.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you see, that's in our nature because we're vulnerable. We don't have a tortoise shell on us. We're vulnerable from the moment we're born. Absolutely. We're vulnerable. So we need to have this sort of awareness all the time. But when it's switched on all the time, well, then it's traumatic, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what post-traumatic growth is about, that yes, there can be traumas and usually it's not the one I'm going through right now where we found the growth. It's the ones we went through in the past. If you can think, oh my gosh, how did I ever get through that? Wow. I didn't even know I was strong in that way, but I was. And then we can grab onto that to help us now. So if we could look back over our lives and see what was hard for me and how did I do this? What did I gain because of that? We can have a bully as a teacher, right? And then we can learn to use our voice. That can be what we learn from that. Then that thing happened for a good reason. It gave us our voice. If we can go back and look at the challenging situation and see what did I gain, then that's post-traumatic growth. And that's what we also want to be able to achieve, because then when the new things come into our life, the old things, we can access that to help us now.
Beautiful.
There's this wonderful a report of this chief of the trauma unit in, I think it was in New York somewhere in the time of COVID, right in the beginning, when people were dying left, right, and center daily, and they had no clue what was happening. And she was interviewed, the head of trauma, she was interviewed and she was asked, how are you coping with this? And she said, I have trained my whole life for this very moment. Every difficulty I have ever been through has prepared me for what I'm going through now. And I was inspired by that, because that is true for each one of us. You know, we're not all looking to be great, you know, in the huge, in large, but we can all be great in our own lives to be able. We have all
in whatever small way. Yeah.
We've been through hard things. We've learned, we've grown through those things, hopefully, you know, or we need help to grow through those things. Then I can, you know, I'm more suited up for what I'm going through now.
Beautiful. Wow.
Yeah. And then I have a bonus chapter in the book on how I broke my neck, because the book was actually finished and then I broke my neck. So what I had to do was take all the chapters of the book and live it. You know, walk the talk. I had to do that. So I included another chapter on how I recovered and how, you know, how I used all of these things: compassion, attitude, gratitude, forgiveness.
Can you show the book again? Because we're gonna say goodbye and we're gonna show the book again.
Do you see it there?
Beautiful. Such a beautiful title. Really profound and pertinent to the topic, and especially your learning.
Yeah. And then at the end of the book,
can you put that on the side?
The last thing I'll just tell you.
I can't put on the side quite yet, but it's on the. I cannot put anything yet. But I can put it on the Facebook page. I'll put the Amazon link.
Okay. Yeah. At the end of the book, I have a case study, quite an extensive case study, even like word for word, you know, and transcribed, of 9 sessions working with a woman with a lot of physical ailments and how she came to healing those. Wow. So I have a whole nother section at the back of the book actually showing the process of using all of these tools.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Rose?
Devorah, you know, by you describing how you've put the book together, we covered everything. I mean, that was my inspiration, because what you were telling us was so interesting that we could have actually just held into one aspect of this. And I thought there's so much more with logotherapy to look at. And you see, you've also had experience in internal body systems. What is it? IFS?
Internal family
system. Have we got a few minutes? Yeah, we've got a few minutes. Can you sort of just give a little run through of an example of how a part? Just talk about a part system.
This is the most beautiful way of describing it, and this comes from Dick Schwartz, who's the founder. And he says like this, that if you have an orchestra filled with beautiful musical instruments and they all come and they start playing their music, it's like going to be a big noise. But in walks a man with a little stick, and he's the conductor, and he goes like this, and all of a sudden there's music. So we look at this. The conductor is the self. And every one of us have self energy. And the aspects of self are compassion, calm, curiosity, courage, connectedness, clarity. When we can be in this space, right, that is the conductor, right? But if we were just to be the piano, just playing, banging away, right, say the fear, then that can overtake everything. What we need to be, and what we do in IFS, is we create a relationship between the conductor and the piano, right? Between the fear and the self. And we create a relationship and a connection so that the part is not feeling that it doesn't trust the self to run the show, to live life. The part has actually taken over. And what we do when we create this relationship between the self and the part is we allow the part to feel self-led.
Right? Say that again.
The part is then self-led. The self is leading the system. The part starts to trust that the self has an ability, because many of our parts which come about, and many of them are at very young ages, where there was too much overwhelm in the system and the system couldn't cope. So then a people pleaser would arise, or a critic would arise. These are different parts that we have. And what happens in that at the time helped us survive a very difficult situation. But 20 and 30 years later, that is not so efficient anymore. So we need to correct and form a relationship between self and the part, because the part lost trust in self because self couldn't handle what was going on at the time. But now self can, and we form this relationship and build a relationship where the part can see who we are as self, the conductor, and starts to trust, yes, she can steer me in the right. I don't have to be this way anymore. So we bring healing to the system. And then that which the part is protecting, which is the exile, the worthlessness, or the abandoned one or the rejected one, then we can go in there and we can heal that part too, to bring healing into the system. So,
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's a lovely way of putting it together.
Yeah, what
It's
a
a
beautiful
lovely way,
explanation.
isn't it?
it's
Yeah.
very
Beautiful
beautiful.
explanation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Devorah, thank you, Rose, for staying up late and joining us at this time. It was a little bit of a juggle, the time today. And Devorah, what appropriate time and book for our country and our world and the people that survived a difficult time. No words can talk about the Holocaust, and how you bring your book into also today's world of trauma, whether it be family or whether it be personal or professional. Like, trauma is trauma, and we all have a choice. And you talked about that, and Rose's work with ISTDP really also addresses that and helps the people to be loving and compassionate, and say, rather than woe is me, is how can I progress.
Yeah.
Rose, some parting words.
Yeah. How can I
Yeah.
find myself, I suppose, isn't that what it's about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To
absolutely.
come to peace. To
Yes.
come to peace.
Wonderful. So I always say we'll meet again soon rather than say goodbye.
Yes, that's lovely. It's been such a privilege to be on your show. Thank you for
well,
Oh, thank you, Devorah. It's not us, it's you.
It will be on our Facebook page, but I will send you the YouTube. It'll be on our YouTube for anyone who's missed the live. So tell your mother if she didn't see it. She'll get to see a beautiful face soon on the YouTube. And God bless, and have a
If
wonderful.
people want to be in touch with me, I do online therapy sessions and virtual, so it works very effectively. And if anyone is looking for some support, I would be happy to. They can contact me through my website, and I have also a YouTube channel with other lectures. If anyone wants to go look up more, with pleasure.
Thank God for our virtual therapy and people we can help all over the world. Okay, Rose. Good night, Rose. Sleep well. Sarayim Tovim, Devorah, and we'll be back next week. Have a wonderful day. Toda.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, 1 second.